Welcome to This Organized Life. If you're a mom, wife, or coffee lover seeking advice on how to reduce clutter and reclaim time, look no further than your host, Laurie, founder of Simply Be Organized and author of Hot Mess, a practical guide to getting organized. For a lot of people, clutter is their dirty little secret, but it doesn't have to be. Each week, we will share practical tips, chat with experts, and provide strategies on how to keep you organized. I hope that by sharing our stories, you feel a little less alone and more empowered to tackle the areas that are holding you back. So let's get started.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to today's episode of This Organized Life podcast. I am your host, Laurie Palau, and you guys, I say this every week, but I'm really excited for today's episode because the topic that we are talking about today is one of my most requested topics that I get. I kid you not. It's the most requested in my real life. It is my most requested, when I'm talking to people about different types of clutter. And if you have listened to our show for any length of time, you know, at the end of each episode, we do what's called our hot mess minute, where we ask people where they feel the most organized and where they feel like a little bit of a hot mess. And by like overwhelming landslide, I don't know the exact numbers, this particular topic, which is digital clutter, is one of the top leading hot mess areas for most people. And so I wanted to bring somebody on who really specialized in digital clutter. And we've done episodes like this before. We had Kate Younger on, I forget what episode, I can link to it. She did a whole great thing about email. And that's the thing with digital clutter is it's really vast. There's so many different areas. There's, your digital files, there's emails, there's photos, there's so many different things. But today's guest is an organizer who specializes specifically with helping people with digital clutter. As a matter of fact, her company she goes by Kate Hufnagel, AKA the Digital Wrangler. So talk about smart branding right there. And we were introduced personally, not too long ago. Apparently she knew who I was well before I knew who she was, but I am so glad to have her here because we're going to be diving into this area that a lot of professional organizers don't want to touch. And a lot of the reason why is because that's not an area that they feel organized in. And so whether you're a fellow organizer listening to this, or you're somebody that's out there that says, hey, I am drowning in digital, this is the episode that you're going to want to listen to. So without further ado, I'm going to welcome my new friend, Kate, to the show. Welcome, Kate.
Laurie, thank you so much for having me on your pod today. I just have to say, when I left corporate America almost 2 years ago, I spent hours and hours and hours listening to This Organized Life to help me figure out what I wanted my organizing business to be. So to be here talking with you today, not only am I fangirling, but I am also just trying to just breathe and just soak this in. So thank you. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Kate Hufnagel. I actually have 2 degrees in engineering. I spent 25 years working in a variety of high-tech fields. I worked at NASA in wind tunnels for a couple of summers. I managed recall programs for a company known for their green tractors. And I spent the majority of my career working in the intelligence community with an emphasis on delivering IT solutions and software solutions to those working in that area. As a digital organizer today, I really view myself on a mission. I am here to help make it fun and hip to talk about all things digital. So whether that means helping people best use their devices and how to manage their data, coaching solopreneurs and small business owners on their digital tools, and like today, encouraging people to develop good digital hygiene practices. So I'm taking all my digital technical know-how and putting it to use so that everyone can benefit.
I love this. Now, before we dive into this, because as you know, as somebody who made a complete pivotal life career transition, what made you, for anybody that's listening out there that might be at a crossroads, and I'm sure that could be a whole other episode. So we're going to give it a really top line, but I would be remiss not to say, like, what made you decide that you were going to leave this really big career doing a lot of really important things to do other meaningful work, but like it was a complete shift. So can you just like unpack that for us a little bit?
I think at the end of the day, Laurie, and I love that question. And like you said, this could be a whole episode, but I think at the end of the day, it came down to I needed to eat my own dog food, right? I have been coaching all of my friends, even coaching those who had been working for me. Go chase your dreams, right? Go do what's going to make you happy. And despite making a very healthy six-figure salary, I just wasn't happy. And my now husband was just like, why do you keep doing this? So he gave me that, little nudge. But at a very, very short, concise, that's in us.
I love it. I love it. And you are living proof that you can, as scary as it is, make those transitions. And so if you're someone out there listening and you might be at that crossroads, if you're in a position and willing and able to do it, we say go for it. You have our blessing.
Yes.
Okay. So now to the topic at hand, digital hygiene, which is really, again, what we're titling this episode. Before we get into the tactical things, why do you think that the whole topic of digital clutter is just a pain point for people? Like, why is it so overwhelming?
Okay, well, this in of itself, I think, can also be its own episode.
We could write a whole book about this. We absolutely
right.
could. So
if we think about our modern world today, Laurie, right? Like we are bombarded with information left and right, right? So we have this world that we live in of information overload, right? On top of that, everything related to digital has become more affordable in recent years, right? And another challenge is that we don't see it. It's not like someone's going to walk into my house and see that my computer files or my phone is full of digital clutter, right? It's not like walking into somebody's garage or pantry where it's right in front of you. And because our devices are so personal to us, right? We hold on to those, like we treasure those. Oh no, you're not going to see my phone. Or like when I go to use my husband's phone, I'm like, I can't find anything on this because it's not organized, for me, right? And I think another contributor to the digital space being so overwhelming is that we don't talk about it. There's no trendy show on Netflix or HGTV, right? There's no pretty Pinterest photos. Oh, look at my beautifully organized email. Or I'm just trying to think of another example, right? Like we just don't have, right? Where that conversation isn't happening. And I think another contributor to it, as weird as it may sound, is that there's no training classes, right?
Yeah.
There's nothing in school about managing our digital lives, right? We didn't even take a training class on how to buy something off of Amazon or how to use Facebook. We just figured it out. And so I think society just assumes that we're going to figure it out. And like you were saying at the top, like people struggle with this. The majority of people haven't figured it out. And I think when you take all those elements and combine them, it's super easy to accumulate digital clutter. It's somewhat affordable. It's invisible to those around us, whether it's people that we live with or people that we work with. And so I am just so grateful to be here with you, Laurie, to shine a light on this topic that, in my opinion, isn't talked about enough.
I love it. And I wrote down, the first thing I wrote down is, and I talk about this, is it's in what I call invisible clutter, because you don't see it, right? It's not, it's like most things. It's not a pain point till it is. It's not a problem until you need that PowerPoint and you can't find it or you need that email because it has that confirmation code that you needed for whatever. And things get lost. And I love also, because I never really thought about the whole training part of it. Like all of a sudden, all of these things were accessible to us online, digitally. But then, like, what do you do with it? Like, what am I supposed to do when okay, I'm booking a trip and I have all these confirmations. Okay, am I supposed to let them sit in my inbox? Am I supposed to put them in a folder? Am I supposed to download them? Am I supposed to print them? What am I supposed to do? What's the right way to do this? Do I delete it? How long do I hold on for? Like all of these things that are kind of going through my mind and you just kind of like, okay, like most things, a lot of times with any type of clutter, they'll do nothing. When you don't know what to do, you just do nothing. And then that in and of itself accumulates. So I really love that perspective that you brought in. And then again, I know I kind of touched on it, but when we're talking about digital clutter, it's also in and of itself is a broad spectrum. How are you defining, and I know we're not going to touch on all of them today because each one is its own episode in and of itself, but how are you defining digital clutter?
So simply put, in Kate's world, my definition of digital clutter is the disorganization of data, files, and or devices. And it can look like a bazillion different things. So let me give you, I don't know, half a dozen examples, right? You are on your phone, you're getting those notifications that you're running out of storage, right? That is a form of digital clutter, right? Like you touched on, Laurie, you can't find an email, whether it's from the school, you can't find an email from a client, and your email is out of control. Digital clutter, right? On your files, right? Your accountant is asking you for a statement or an invoice. You can't find that. You can't find that permission slip that you signed electronically, but you forgot to send to the school. You can't find the password because you have passwords either like stored in your keychain, stored in your browser, stored in a password manager. And believe it or not, so many people would have like 3 different Amazon passwords for their Amazon account because they're stored in different locations and they're not updating.
Well, that's the other thing, the updating, like every time you have to change it, do you go back into your original file and update it? And then you're like, because that has happened to me where I'm like, oh, wait, it didn't remember me. I have to go in and the password that I had saved in my file, I didn't update. So it was like 5 passwords ago. And I'm like, this isn't even relevant anymore.
Exactly. And then like for those of us, who are business owners, I've gotten some emails from you, Laurie. I know that you believe in this, right? We love to send personalized emails to those on our list, right? You want the email to say, hello, Kate, right? And if you don't have your data organized, right? I could be getting an email that says, hello, Colorado, and not even know it, right?
Right.
And other ways that digital clutter can show up in our lives is, we can be paying month after month, whether it's an app that we paid $1.99 for because right, digital things have gotten more affordable. But if you add those up, you could, without really knowing or realizing, you could be spending $100 or more a month on digital things that maybe you have even abandoned. So that's like just a multitude of different ways that digital clutter can manifest itself in our everyday lives.
I love it. Can I actually share a little digital win that I had not that long ago? And I think, so we recently just switched over accountants. And so he needed some work for my business. So we were doing like all the personal stuff. And he's like, can you send me he needed a copy of like my original like LLC from back when I first incorporated, which was like 2008, 2009. And he's like, because I need your EIN and I need the whole thing, whatever. And I was like, okay. And I was running out to go do something, but I knew that I was the bottleneck for him to be able to get stuff done. So in 2 seconds, I literally just pulled up the file because I knew exactly where it was. I have on Dropbox, I have a folder that has SBO like documents, and it's got all the like important, like, whatever stuff like that. And I just sent him, I replied to his email and I said, here you go. And he was like, and the whole exchange took like under 5 minutes. And he immediately was like, oh my gosh, like you really are so organized. And I started laughing and I was like, haha, occupational hazard. But my point of my story isn't to be like, oh, look how great you are. The amount of time that saved, the amount of anxiety that could have been producing, if I didn't have that in a place that I knew, I could have spent all afternoon looking for this. He would have had to wait. It could have been I would have gotten anxious and annoyed and frustrated, and that would have affected all these things. But something that could have gone sideways took me literally 2 seconds because I happen to be organized there. So,
oh my gosh, I'm fangirling. And but that's the perfect story, right? Because you said like that document's how many, 12, 14 years old? Right. And so even the fact that you had it digital, right? Because back then,
no, I had scanned it, and that's true.
Yeah.
I had it. The actual thing is scanned. It is not. It didn't even originate as a digital document. I'm dating myself here, people. But I think again, it talks about when I talk about anything, and I know you're a longtime listener, and for anybody who might be new to our show, whenever I talk about organization for anything, and I think this is so important when it comes to digital in particular, is I talk about the ease of retrieval. The whole point of organizing something isn't the act of putting it away. It's about how quickly can I access this when I want it. And that could mean the spices in your cabinet, the sweater in your closet, or the files. And for me, digital, and that's where I say digital isn't a problem until it is. It's that ease of retrieval when people are like, oh, where is that photo, or where is that email, or where is that document? And you're staring down the barrel of thousands and thousands and thousands of stuff. And it's like finding a needle in a haystack.
Absolutely. I couldn't have said it better.
So where do people, if they're like, yeah, okay, so where do you start? So again, you've got all these things, and to make the analogy of like somebody's house, you're just organized all over the place. Every room's a mess. So where do you start? Because you got to pick somewhere.
You do have to pick somewhere. Absolutely. So for me, when I work with clients, it boils down to the individual, right? And meeting the individual where they are, which I think even from a physical organizing perspective, right? That's what all organizers do, right? Knowing that every person uses devices differently. We have different personalities, right? Our brains work differently. So when I work with clients, I try to figure out whether it's through observation or having a direct conversation. What is most important to them? So what's most important to you, listener, right? Do you want to be able to send a correct email to your distro list? Do you want to be able to find your children's medical information or school information without it stressing you out? Right? Do you want to be able to save the videos and photos of your kids or your grandkids with ease and be able to find them? Right? So I would encourage people to think about what's most important. And I guess another way to look at it is like, what's your biggest pain point? But I like to think more optimistically, right? So what's of importance? What's going to be most valuable to you? And then kind of use that as a North Star to guide you in terms of figuring out, okay, then what are going to be my steps if it's most important to me to have all my passwords in one location?
Right. I love it. And again, you could do all of them. It's just, you're not going to do all of them at once. You're going to start with one area. So let's just walk through a couple of different things, do's, don'ts, recommendations, and I'll let you drive the bus on this. Because again, this whole episode, we want it to be about digital hygiene. Like, are there certain things that we should be doing, or that are just kind of like best practices when it comes to any type of digital organization?
Okay, well, why don't we start with files, right? Those
Go
are
for it.
pretty generic.
Mhm.
And what I love about talking about electronic files is that the where doesn't really matter, right? It doesn't matter to me if you are storing files on your computer or on Dropbox, or you use Google Drive, or you're using Microsoft 365, right? The
Right.
where isn't as important as what it is. And so for this example, we're talking about files. So if you are, let's say, a small business owner, right? What types of files might you have? We're talking, you're tracking your financials. You have those formation documents, Laurie, that you just mentioned, right?
Right.
You've got contracts with vendors. You have files related to your clients, right? Invoices, project details, maybe before and after photos, right? So that's a lot of files and a lot of different types of files. So the first thing that I would ask a small business owner is, okay, let's come up with a file structure or a folder structure that makes sense for you, right? And what I've learned is that most business owners like to kind of have two different models. One for um, files that for like client facing work, right?
Okay.
So that might look like literally the folder is called client work, and then they've got a folder with every client or project name in there. Or they may flip it around and they may have under client work the year, and then within the year have a folder for each client, so that if they happen to have a CPA who wants them to go find an invoice, they can find it.
Got it.
And some business owners then will take a different file structure for what I would categorize as like their internal business operations, right?
Mhm.
They might have a folder for, employees or subcontractors, a folder for contracts, the legal documents, their financial statements. So I would encourage like small business owners to kind of almost look at those two different categories. For adults, right? I mean, living in our personal lives, we're probably having files like utility bills that we get electronically, bank statements,
You don't
insurance.
save those, do you? I'm like, I don't save any of those. Like if I get a utility bill, I'm like, okay, delete.
Well, actually do save them
You
because if I
do?
get, well, I'm a home-based business,
Oh, but you're doing it from a business person. Right. Okay. So you want to hold
right?
on
So
to
I
it.
keep them for like
Okay.
3, 4 years, right?
Okay. Gotcha.
Um, but some people do like to have a history of their like financial statements, right? Insurance policies,
Yep.
medical information, any tax related, documents. And then parents might have school files. I don't know, Isaac had surgery, so I've got some, digital information about that, right? So when it comes to our personal lives, having a file structure that mimics your life, right?
Mhm.
Maybe a folder that's utilities, house,
Yep.
finance, medical, right? And then maybe having a folder dedicated for each child, that might make sense depending on how, your brain works. Ultimately, regardless of whether we're talking personal or business, the most important piece of advice that I can give when it comes to electronic files is have, as best you can, a common folder structure
Mhm.
and use a consistent naming convention.
Oh, that's a good one because again, yeah, I like that. I'm writing notes, people, so I can if anybody's watching this on YouTube and you see my head down, it's because I'm taking notes as Kate's talking.
And because like, let's face it, like when was the last time you looked at like your downloads folder? And oftentimes those file names are either going to be a bunch of gobbledygook, or it's
Mhm.
going to be download 1, download 2, download 3,
Yes.
download 4, right? And
Yeah.
if you come up with a consistent naming convention. So I know a lot of people in the finance world have figured out for them, like they'll have the year, 2 months for the month, and then like the day. So for instance, 2023-03-17, right? And they use the 2 months for, or the 2 digits for the month, because then when they sort by title, it is literally automatically sorted by date.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of those things people just don't realize. They're like, I'm going to do
You just
January.
don't think about it. Right. They don't think
Right.
about it. Yes. Yeah.
Right. If you type out January and type out February and you sort by title name, they're not going to be in chronological order. And that's yet, I mean, it might just take a couple of seconds, but it's taking a little bit more time to go pull what you need from that ease of retrieval perspective.
I love it. I love it. I do the same even with our podcast stuff. Like I title everything starting with EP, and then I do whatever and everything is. So they all come up, and I have that consistency in how I am filing or branding it. And back in the day when I started my business, I did a lot of home office organizing, and I would help people set up traditional filing. Now, there's like that if you were to get me to do it, like it would have to, I charge a high premium for that because it's like my least favorite thing. But it was this similar conversation when it came to, I don't care if you want to say we're going to do by year or we're going to do your files by category. It's the key is it's got to be consistent, and it's got to be something that you and the people that need to access it will all be able to identify.
Absolutely.
And so as you were talking about it, it really was the same. It's the same basic principles. It's just doing it in the interwebs as opposed to doing it in a brick and mortar old school filing cabinet.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So many principles and philosophies in the physical organizing world can easily be applied to the digital world.
Now, I'm curious about this one do you spend a lot of time, and I'm saying the word spend, not waste, which is what I wanted to say. Do you spend a lot of time encouraging people to delete old files that are just taking up space? And I'm not even necessarily talking from like a storage, like, oh, you're running out of space, but just because it's like cluttering it up a little bit, because I probably have stuff on my computer in the spirit of transparency that are like old blog posts or something, you know what I mean? Like things that I don't need, and it's just there. But do I want to take the time to do it?
Well, that's the thing, right? It does take time. I even over the Christmas holidays went through my digital photos because I had quite a lot. And even, okay, so today, the average American takes like over 20 photos a day on their phone. Okay, you do the math, that then turns into 600 a month and over 7,000 photos a year. Do we need to keep every single one of those photos? I'm going to bet you $1 that the answer is no. And here is where, even for me, where I have a pretty routine practice of going through my photos. Okay. Let's say I go through my photos today. Oh, last week. Oh, look at that. There's a couple of memes I sent my bestie. Okay. I don't need them, right? So I delete them. But I see a photo last week that I took with a friend of mine. And I'm like, no, I'm going to hold on to that. But guess what? In 6 months, a year from now, that photo really may not be that important to me. And it's going to be a little bit easier for me to let go of that photo. So the same applies when it comes to like our digital files too, right? We may think today that file is worth holding on to. 6 months from now, 6 years from now, we're likely going to have a different answer. Right. So going back and reviewing your files, whether that's your electronic files or your photos or your videos or your music collection or your book collection that you have digitally,
Yeah.
There is some value in doing that, because our values change. We evolve as human beings. Our interests change.
I can't get enough of it. Now, what about, and I know you said that you don't necessarily have a personal preference, right? Whether you use Google, Dropbox, Microsoft 360. I know you said it's fine if you leave it on your computer, but do you feel like that there should be some place that it's like not taking up storage space on your computer? You should be having it on like a third party thing. Like, do you have a school of thought relating to that? Or
No, I think when it comes to the important documents, quite frankly, I think it's more important that you have a backup somewhere, right?
yeah.
So
Yeah.
like if you have them on your computer, do you
Mhm.
have them backed up either to a cloud or
Yeah.
to a Google Drive or something,
Gotcha.
right? Just because things
Right.
happen.
Yeah, for sure. Um, and I know we're not talking about photos, but we're going to move on to passwords. But I just had a question on photos since you did mention it. Do you keep your photos, like, do you keep them on your phone and in the cloud, or do you have like a third party? Like, do you put them into like a Shutterfly or a Dropbox or some other thing?
For me personally, I hoard my photos. I do not use a third party.
Okay.
Simply because, well, one, I don't want to pay for it, and two, and this could just be like my former corporate person coming out. By putting them into a third party, the third party is responsible for them, right?
Right.
What if Shutterfly or Dropbox
Yes.
goes bankrupt tomorrow
Yes.
or goes out
Yeah.
of business? Then what
Mhm.
happens to my data?
Yeah.
So I'm a little bit of a control freak when it comes to that.
Yeah.
Um, but and for your audience, like, I do not organize photos. Like, that is a whole other genre of expertise,
Yeah.
um, that I, quite frankly, I don't want to touch at all. Like, I'll organize my own, but that's it.
Well, and it's a hard thing, I think, to organize for other people because you don't know all the players. So you don't know who's important and what memory is important. Like, there are certain things that are really, I mean, yes, you could look at something and say, okay, you've got 6 different photos of basically the same. So like,
Yes.
let's just pick the best one. And but there are so many things of like that are really truly, because photos are such a personal identity. But I was just, since you mentioned it, I had to go there because I know for us, we've streamlined, and I still, in, again, full disclosure, I don't always delete them off my phone, even though we do use Shutterfly. Again, free ad for Shutterfly. Because it allows everybody in our family to have access, and it frees up, and we have one by year, and then we just have, like, if we have a big event, like we went to Hawaii, I created a Hawaii folder. Everybody can just upload your photos into Hawaii. And then if you want to see it, you can go and grab them. And it just takes the ownership off of me or whomever to have to be the keeper of all the secrets or the keeper of all the stuff. And
Absolutely. I mean, Apple has the same thing. So like when I go on my
yeah,
annual girls trip, right, we create a shared album.
yeah,
Each of us are contributing our photos to
totally.
it, and then it doesn't count towards the storage on our phones.
Yes, we do that yeah. So again, I think the problem is there's oftentimes too many things.
Yeah.
Like, you could do it on Apple, you could do a Google you could do it on Shutter. Like, so now you have pictures all over the place. And
Right.
again, now you can, I feel like digital clutter can almost be like a gremlin. It can just multiply really, really fast.
Oh, absolutely. Hands down, no question about it.
Again, like, I have probably 3 or 4 versions of my book on my computer, like the drafts, like, here was draft 1, here was, and again, or different things that you've saved it, and it's like V1, V2, V6, and we don't always go back and delete. Again, this is like me preaching to the choir, that I think it just becomes like, okay, wait a second, we need to wrangle this in. I want to pivot a little bit and talk about passwords.
Oh, one
And
of my favorite.
and you're you're a data safety intelligence person. So there's a whole lot of layers when it comes to password security, like cybersecurity and all that. So I'm just going to kind of open the floor up to you to talk about that.
Well, thank you for giving me an opportunity to talk. And, there may be some eye rolling as people listen to this episode as I talk, but like you mentioned, right, I am coming from the intelligence community, right? I was in charge of making sure that systems were impenetrable, and or untraceable, right? So I have a few do's when it comes to passwords.
Okay.
So the first one is, please do use long passwords. Most websites usually want a password of 8 characters. I personally lean more towards the 12, 14 characters. And I actually just worked with a client last week out of New England who had characters of 20. And I was like, wow, that's really impressive. So the longer the better. And the reason is the longer the password, the harder it's going to be for a hacker to crack it. Okay.
Okay.
So in addition to the length of the password, you also want to make sure that your password is complex. And what do I mean by that? You want to have uppercase, lowercase, special characters, numbers. And yes, that means things kind of become a little bit gobbledygook. But having all of those characters at your disposal makes that password complex and adds even more time for a bad actor to figure it out.
Gotcha.
The third tip I have is to use unique passwords. No more fluffy 1, 2, 3 for everything, okay? And I know that it's super trendy right now to recycle and thrift clothing. Passwords is not the place to recycle or reuse. Okay, if you think about this, right, as humans, right, it's our behaviors, it's easy. I'm gonna use these same passwords over and over. But if a bad actor gets into one of your accounts, they're then going to go to all the other popular accounts, right? Like Amazon, Facebook, Hulu, whatever, and they're going to try that password.
Right.
And more than likely, it's going to work on a couple of them. And the next thing you know, talk about it mushrooming. That's mushrooming in a really bad and potentially nefarious way. So the other thing, and we kind of touched on this earlier, that I recommend is that you have one authoritative source for your passwords. If you are keeping them in multiple places, it's work to have them all updated and have the correct password. So I encourage people to have the password stored in one place. Now, if you are like my 80-year-old parents and believe that writing your passwords down in a little black book is best, okay, I'm going to meet you where you are. That's going to work for you. But just know that I'm going to ask questions like, okay, so what happens if you're at Target and that book falls out of your bag and you don't know it? What happens, right? So I do encourage people to consider using a password manager, keep all of those passwords in one location, and keep them secure. And on my resources page on my website, I have a link to a tool where you can punch in your password and it will tell you, oh, it's going to take 14 seconds for it to be cracked, or it takes 2 million years.
No way. I'm totally doing that.
Okay.
I'm going to try that because I'm a little skeptical about the, I'm a little better than a 1, 2, 3, but I'm not at a 20 character. I'll tell you that much.
Okay. Yeah, that tool is very eye-opening. And so when it comes to all of these, suggestions that I offer, if I were going to say, let's prioritize, right? To me, And I don't know about you, Laurie, but like one of my favorite hobbies is hoarding my cash. I don't want anyone ever getting into my bank accounts,
Sure.
right? So I am making sure that every bank account has a long password, that it's complex, and it is unique.
Okay.
Right?
Yep.
Now, fun fact, the number one targeted type of systems from by hackers are actually healthcare systems. So after you improve, let's say, the strength of the passwords on your financial accounts, if your medical information is important, that would be where I suggest you tackle next.
Interesting.
Right? I don't care if people know I had an appendectomy, but there's other things about my personal medical history that I don't want like floating around out there. But again, that's a personal,
Is it
decision.
because you have like your social security number? Like why why is that such a hot thing? Because again,
well, I think it depends on the person, right?
Okay.
Like, people may not want the world to know what medications they're on or what their blood pressure is.
Right.
So that is, again, it's a personal, decision, but I wanted to mention it since it is such a targeted
for sure.
area. And then the third bucket is any website, and this might cause some overwhelm or anxiety.
Yeah.
But any website that you have your credit card information stored on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I know these days that can be a lot of different websites. So that's why if I were to prioritize them, like start with your bank accounts.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want anyone getting access to your money.
Yeah.
Right? Maybe medical if that's important to you. And then anything else that has a credit card.
And then can I just add all the like two-factor authentication stuff? Like we should always have that on, even though it's annoying. Don't you agree?
Oh, completely. It is annoying, but that is from a digital hygiene, digital safety perspective.
Yeah.
Yes, that just adds a whole other layer of things, of protection from the bad actors out there.
And I can say as a business owner who I have a team of people who help me do different things, and some of it is financial. It's annoying, not annoying for me, but like for them more than it is for me. Like a lot of times they want to access, I trust them and they have access to PayPal or Stripe or whatever it is. And they have to text me, hey, can you send me the code? And it's worth it because obviously, and they know it. And it's that extra step where, you know what, you just want to protect your stuff. And so whether it's a business thing or personal thing, it's really wise to be able to have that, to just say, hey, wait, I just got to log in on Amazon at somebody from, Clearwater, Florida. Is that you?
Right.
And it's
absolutely. I saw my doctor a couple months ago and I was telling him about what I'm doing and we had a whole other conversation. But it was a sick appointment. And as I was leaving, I walked past his office and he waves at me and he's like, Kate, look, I can't even send the prescription to the pharmacy until because he had gotten a text message confirming him. And so even, doctors can't send a prescription to Walgreens without getting a text and a secret code.
Yeah. Now, again, we're not trying to give necessarily free advertising, or we're not trying to be product pushers. However, if we have people that are like, okay, where should I be storing? Let's say they're not your parents that wanted to save in their little black book. Obviously, there's running the spectrum of things. I mean, I've had people say, I can't use, LastPass or anything, and this is no shame to them because I can't remember my password to that. I've had people say that to me. So is there a recommendation of where these things should be, where you recommend people store their passwords?
Well, I'm not going to repeat the company that you just mentioned because I actually just moved away from them.
Okay, that's fair. I get it.
But there are some tricks. And so there's several password managers out there. And based on my research, they're
Yes.
doing an exceptional job, right? That is their specialty, right? Yes, we can store passwords in Chrome or Firefox, but those are browsers, right? Password management is not going to be their forte, right? So you do want a password manager. And in terms of like remembering that master password, there are some tricks, right? You can come up with a favorite phrase. Right? Kate loves wine. And then I can take those words, right? I could substitute the L and maybe make it an exclamation point.
Okay. Yeah.
I can take the letter A and substitute it and make it the
Ampersand,
A or the ampersand
or
the
an
ampersand,
A, either one. Yeah.
or the at sign, right?
Yep.
So you can, some maybe like write out your phrase and then ask yourself, okay, can I substitute symbols? Can I substitute a number?
Oh, I love that.
And then over time, you'll just build that muscle memory and it'll become more automatic.
I love it. I love it. I'm like looking at my list. There's so much. Okay. So let me see if I could go through a couple other quick things. Like we're going to kind of almost do like a rapid fire just because in the spirit of time.
Yes.
So any storage tips for the phones in terms of like deleting apps, organizing? I have folders on my phone. I like everything on one page. I don't like the whole scrolly, but are there any specific things or best practices that you think with regard to that?
Okay, I'll give you 3, try and rapid fire.
Okay, go for it.
Delete your deleteds, right? Like on your camera roll, when you delete a photo or when you delete a voicemail message, they're actually not deleted. So just take that extra step, delete your deleteds.
Yep.
Review your storage utilization. I like to encourage people to do that, like when we either change the clocks or we start a new season. Right? Go in there, check your storage utilization. You might be surprised to learn, like I did last summer, when I suddenly was getting these messages like, I'm running out of storage. I'm like, why am I running out of storage? Well, I had, unbeknownst to me, over 150 Oprah's podcasts saved to my phone. I didn't realize that my phone had downloaded like 150 of them, right? But until you examine your storage utilization, you don't know what you don't know.
And that's just in settings, people, right? It's just in settings. You just go in there and look at.
Right. And then the third tip I have is be careful about double saving the same thing, right? If you get a text message on your family thread, right? And it's, oh, look, grandma's visiting the grandkids and she sent a video, right? If you then save that video to your camera roll, you now have it saved in your camera roll and in your text messages. There's no need to be saving them multiple times.
Okay, so what do you do? Because I do that all the time. Like somebody will send me a picture. My nephew's in the Navy, so I'll get a picture of him and I'm like, oh, save it. Now it's still in my text thread, but it's there, but I want the ease of retrieval and I'm not going to go through 10,000. So what do you do in that situation?
So you can do a couple of things. So after you save it to your camera roll, you can
just delete it.
Then delete it from the text message.
Oh, okay.
Or if you're like most people and you forget to do that,
right?
At some point you're going to want to delete that whole text thread and then I'll just start a new one.
Right. Okay. Got it.
So you got options.
Got it. Kate, there's like so many things. I mean, you have just, first of all, we'll have you back. We'll figure out, we're going to put a poll out to everybody after this drops and say, like, what did you love most? What do you want to hear more of? So we'll definitely, because this is such an important topic from, like you said, from an intelligence safety data perspective, as well as from an organizational perspective and just all the things. And then again, the financial part of like, why are you paying for apps that you're not using and things like that? So there's so many different reasons why this is such a relevant topic. Where can people go to find you, learn more, connect up with you?
Well, the easiest way is to go to my website. That's thedigitalwrangler.com. I have got lots of resources on my website. I have a free ebook on tips on how to wrangle your phone, which includes tips on how to extend the battery life of your phone. And it's all about how can you take control of your phone as opposed to letting your phone control you. And I've got links to books and apps, basically all things digital are also on my website.
I love it. And of course, we will link to all of this or all things Kate in our show notes on our podcast page. So don't worry about that if you're out and about. We'll make sure that you have easy access to all of her information. We're going to take one more quick break and when we come back, we're going to just put you in the hot seat for our rapid fire questions. So sit tight. All right, Kate, this has been such a great conversation. Again, I have notes all over left and right, things I'm going to do, things I can't wait to share with people. So this is so incredible. Now I'm going to turn the tables and talk to you about our end of, the wrap-up questions that we ask all of our guests, which are we'll start with the book, which is, what book or books are you reading that either are transformational for you or something that you're currently reading that has been really eye-opening for you that you want to share with our listeners?
I've got two books, Laurie.
Go for it.
So the first one is more from Kate, the human being.
Go for it.
Melissa Urban last year launched a book called The Book of Boundaries. Now, I have always struggled with boundaries, hence why I became such a workaholic. And I have always put others before me as well. And in recent years, I became a bonus mom. So I've worked with business coaches, and I've had some therapists over the years. Her book is just awesome, and she includes all sorts of different scenarios. And what I love about it is that she includes some scripts as well.
Oh, that's great.
And she categorizes them using a stoplight. Like green script is going to be like the most loving way to kind of hold your boundary. And then if the person kind of continues to push the boundary, you can move to the yellow, and then you can move to the red, where it's basically like, I'm peacing out.
Yeah. Oh my God. I love it. I know I'm going to actually check that out, because I've loved book like Boundaries by Henry McCloud is like one of my favorite books. So I will definitely check that out. And what's your other one? So Kate, the Digital Wrangler.
Yeah. So from a business perspective, Measure What Matters by John Doerr is one of my all-time favorite business books. He talks about the importance of having objectives and key results. And in his book, basically, it's a book, a collection of case studies from Bill Gates and Bono, right? Bono followed his methodology with all of his anti-poverty work. And it's just really cool. It gives you a different perspective on how to think about goals. And if you just think about the title of the book, right? You're going to measure what is actually important to you, right? If you want to grow your community, or if it's more important for you to grow revenue, how are you going to know that you're hitting your goals?
Yeah.
So it's just a really great book from a business perspective.
I'm buying both of them because, and this is why I asked this question for everybody out there. Spoiler alert, I ask it for myself, as well as for you, but I always love to know. So these are awesome books, and I can't wait to check them out. And then the last two questions we ask every guest, every episode, is, in this particular season of your life, where do you feel the most organized, and where do you feel like a little bit of a hot mess?
Oh, I love this question, Laurie. I'm so glad that you asked this question. So one of the first bosses that I had sat down with me like 22 years ago, and was like, Kate, you need to learn how to toot your own horn. So I love this question. Right now, I am most proud of the way that my business is organized. And I don't just mean that from having like my digital files organized, but it's all about the processes I've put in place, the tools that I'm using, the business rhythms that I've established for myself. I'm just really proud of how all of that works, because I can turn it off at night, I can sleep well, and I'm having fun. So That's a great question.
I love that. I love that. And then again, just in the spirit of authenticity, right? I always like to end with a put up, but in the spirit of authenticity. So people think that just because you're in the organizational space, that your life is perfect in all areas. Where, if there's an area that needs a little additional nurturing or TLC, where would that be?
Okay. And I'm sure the YouTube watchers are seeing me like laugh in the background. Okay. So it's mid-March, right? Those of us who are adults, it's tax season, right? Now, fun fact about me, I'm going to be 50 next year. So I am a little bit, later in life. And I got married about 5 months ago. And I've never been married before.
Wow.
And we're going to be filing our taxes jointly as a married couple.
Oh,
you see where I'm going with this?
Yeah, that's a lot.
And because my husband, who's in the Navy, so thank you to your nephew for his service.
Thank you to your husband for his service. Amazing.
So because my husband is not shy about letting people know that I'm way smarter than him when it comes to everything related to money, taxes, and finances, I'm in charge of collecting all of this. And I'm like, babe, I don't even know what you have. And so we're dealing with that internally. And my CPA, who's amazing, has a new support person. So there's just a lot of turmoil, but I just keep telling myself, okay, this is going to be over soon.
It's so going to be over soon. It's just temporary.
Yeah. And we're going to do better next year.
Hey, absolutely. This is your practice run, but
exactly.
Oh my gosh. That's great. That's great. Well, Kate, again, I could talk to you for hours. I know our audience is going to love this episode and just gobble it up. As stressful and anxiety producing as it could be for people, you really broke it down into such simple, actionable steps and digestible things that people can do. So thank you for doing that. And if you are new to our show, please welcome. You picked a great episode to hop in on. Click the subscribe button wherever it's a plus, wherever you're listening, or if you're watching us on YouTube. And if you like this episode, share it with a friend, because the best way that we can grow the show and allow other people to hear great guests like Kate is just through word of mouth. And if you guys like this, we really appreciate you giving our show a nod that way. And we're here each week. We've been here for a long flipping time. So feel free to go back and check out our back catalog, where you can find, as Kate said at the top of the episode, hours and hours of content. So anything that we can do to help you live a more organized life. And until next week, I am Laurie Palau. Peace out. Thanks for tuning in. If you like this episode, please spread the love and share it with your friends. And if this is your first time joining us, make sure to click the subscribe button wherever you are listening so you never miss an episode. And while you're there, please leave us a review so other people know that our show is worth the listen. You can also find us on YouTube and Instagram at This Organized Life Podcast. And if you'd like to connect with us, you can head on over to our website at simply the letter B like boy organized.com, which is filled with tons of resources, including free downloads, checklists, links to our amazing organizing partners, and all of our digital offerings. I'll see you next week for another episode of This Organized Life.